views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Perspectives. I am Daren Jaime. Of course, we thank you for joining us. And as always, you can watch Perspectives every week here on BronxNet's Channel 67. Well, guess what? We've come to the end of the year 2021, and we've got a best of show for you. Want to let you know we've got some of the best highlights that we've had here on Perspectives, bringing you up close and personal with some very special guests, in addition to some topics that we want to recap and highlight as we look back at the year 2021. So stay with us because Perspectives begins right now.
What's on your mind? Express what's on your mind. What's on your mind?
Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, you speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective with shines of light. Cause it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference in someone's life. Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.
What's your perspective? Let them know.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Perspectives. I am Daren Jaime. As we said, we want to welcome you to this show, a very special show, as we are at our year end for 2021. We take a look back at some of the biggest stories, some of the biggest interviews that we did, the things that made headlines, and the things that kept us going throughout the course of this year right here on Perspectives. But before we do that, we want to give a very special shout out to all of our viewers. You guys have been so faithful to us down through the years. It's hard to believe that for more than 20 years, we've actually been doing Perspectives, and you've been following us, sending us emails, and also social media. Let me know when you see me in the Bronx, all about the show, what you like, and even sometimes what you don't like. But I want to thank you for being a part of this show because it really is just that. It was designed to help us to be able to share perspectives. We don't always have to agree, but it's important to know where somebody's coming from. And so we open up a platform and we have this dialogue and we have this opportunity to be able to talk and hear from people. Yeah, some people, let's be honest. There's some people I might have a little issue with, but their perspective matters. And we're glad that we can bring them on the show to be able to share with us. So we want to thank our guests. And then, again, as we look back at this year, there's no way that we can do it without the credit of staff. And so I want to thank the BronxNet staff and all those who really work very hard to help us. There are a lot of people behind the scenes to make sure that our show gets on the air. I want to take the time to really say thank you to those persons who've helped us to get the show on the air. And there are two very special people I want to thank. First of all, I want to thank my producer, Curlew Burton. He's been with me for, about 20 years now. We've been doing this together. And he literally has been a force that has helped us to navigate, to get the show on the air, talking about the topics, researching, coming up with some of the guests, not some of the guests, all of our guests, to be able to have these conversations and these dialogues and bring you this. And so Curlew works very hard behind the scenes. And so we want to give a shout out to him and his family. I know recently he's talked about the death of his pastor and just trying to really recoup from that. And so Curlew, just want to say a special shout out and thank you for what you've done. The second person we want to thank is our line producer, Lindsay. And I want to let you know about Lindsay. Lindsay has been tremendous for us. And unfortunately, this is going to mark the end of her journey with us as she is moving on from BronxNet and then moving on from Perspectives. But Lindsay's our line producer. And what that means is she does all the in-between stuff. The graphics that you see, the fonts that you see, putting up with the guests, putting up with myself, trying to manage time. It's been a wonderful journey as Lindsay's been our line producer for several years here on Perspectives. She's moving on, and we want to let you know, Lindsay, I know Curlew's already told you off camera, but I want to tell you on camera how much you mean and how vital you are to the work that we do. We're going to miss you, definitely going to miss you, and want to see the best for you. And wherever you go, remember that, Perspectives was a part of your foundation, and you've always got an open door to be able to come back. And want to say a special shout out to our line producer, Lindsay. But as I said, talking about staff and those, they really worked to make it happen here on the show. And throughout the year 2021, we had some very interesting guests and talked about some very interesting topics. Some of our mainline guests that you've seen, of course, Joyce Johnson bringing us the political platform. We also got JC Polanco, who's been faithful to us throughout the course of this year. And we also want to thank Mark Claxton, who's also been a voice working with law enforcement as an analyst across several stations, but he does take the time to be with us. And we want to say to Mark, thank you so much for being with us and sharing his perspective with us. Johanna Rogers, who's also been a voice talking about critical race theory, women's issues, issues of race and gender. She's been with us and want to thank her for being with us as well. But when we talk about some of these shows that we've taken a look at, who can forget the January 6th insurrection that took place in Washington, D.C.? We were able to talk about that. The Chauvin Trial in Minneapolis, the officer who killed George Floyd, murdered George Floyd, right there on film for more than 9 minutes. We talked about his trial as well. We also talked about the Haitian situation and the Haitian migrants, and how they've been affected during this, the COVID-19 pandemic, things that we've had to deal with and wrestle with. We're not out of it now. We've got a Delta variant, we've got an Omicron variant, and we've got much more to talk about. But we tried to bring people the issues, food insecurity, poverty, homelessness. Those are the things that happened as a result of COVID and became further exacerbated with COVID. We also talked about the criminal justice system, the need for reform, whether it's Rikers Island, whether it's bail, whether it's police brutality. We talked about all these issues right here on Perspectives. And who can forget about the world of politics? Right here in the borough of the Bronx, a new Bronx borough president will be making her way into office. Vanessa Gibson will be the new Bronx borough president. As far as our mayor, a new mayor, Eric Adams, a new police chief, and a brand new administration in the city of New York, the city council, and even in our local representation. We talked to a variety of politicians. And who can forget, of course, New York State Governor, former New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo, resigning under sexual harassment allegations. This is just a few of the things we brought you throughout the course of the year here on Perspectives. And we're glad that we had some great guests. And most of all, we're thankful that you watched and you were able to share. So on this show, we're going to take a look back at some of the best interviews that we had throughout the course of the year. And when we say best, it's just some things that myself and our staff thought was great to bring you back again. And then, of course, we look forward to 2022. We got some great things on the calendar, some exciting guests, some topics that we want to be able to talk about, and some things we want to follow up on and see what progress has been made from 2021 to 2022. So we invite you to stay with us right now as we give you the best of right here on Perspectives. Well, I think the last time we got together, we were talking on a little bit more pleasant note. But as we look at this show today, we have to focus on January 6th, 2021. Many Americans were saying, listen, I'm hoping to get out of 2020 with all that COVID had to offer, looking for new light in 2021. And less than a week in, a riot at the Capitol. I remember because I was literally about 20 to 25 minutes away from there. But give me your thoughts on what you saw and your reaction.
Well, I was actually on the air live on WBAI on my show, Law of the Land. And I was looking at the C-SPAN coverage and speaking on the air live on radio when I heard the scuffling. And I know what it sounds like when a fight breaks out and chairs start falling. And so I said, oh, my goodness, even though the cameras were turned onto the chamber proper, watching Nancy Pelosi and others count the votes, the electoral votes. And this was supposed to be the coverage of the Electoral College votes, the last part of a process we had discussed earlier. And then when I heard the ruckus and I thought, oh, my God, what is happening? Here's my concern. What I saw was a lynch mob. And our nation's history is filled with over 5,000 brutal murders by lynch mobs. We saw a lynch mob. They had actually erected a gallows. They had like ties to hold hostages. They had weapons and lead pipes and tear gas. They were there to kill. And when they reached Nancy Pelosi's office, if she had been there, I think they would have killed her. And so I was shocked by what I saw, but I was also shocked by what I didn't see. I didn't see the full contingent of police they had for Black Lives Matter protesters that summer. I didn't see the arrests that should have been taking place, nor did I see them actually shooting these people, even though their guns were out to protect the chamber proper. These things were appalling, traumatizing for a constitutional law professor like myself and others who believe in the rule of law and the role of law. But it still remains to be seen what will ever be done to these people who were this brazen.
Listen, coming up on this edition of Perspectives, we go front and center with the Chauvin Trial in the death of George Floyd. This case, not just national, but worldwide, as all eyes are literally glued to the screen, waiting for a jury verdict to come back. The prosecution is rested. The defense is rested. The question is, has the prosecution done enough to get a conviction? Has the defense done enough to create room for a reasonable doubt? Joining us now to share a little bit more and weigh in on this conversation, we are pleased to be joined by Jody Morales. She is a criminal defense attorney in the Bronx in New York City. And Jody, good to have you back here on Perspectives, and glad to have you sharing with us.
Thanks for having me back again.
Thank you. Well, as we are here now, of course, as I said, all of the world is watching literally to find out in what should be an open and shut case for many people. We'll come back and talk about that in a minute. But as you watch this trial, talk to me about your reactions as a lawyer to what you saw.
Well, I had the benefit of watching the entire closing argument of both sides. And what I saw from the prosecution was a very powerful summation. I mean, he just summed up the information and the evidence in a way that was not only passionate, but complete and concise and very, very powerful, so that the jury could really understand how important it is, what their job is at this point, and why they need to take this job extremely seriously. Now, the defense delivered, a closing argument as well, which is customary. The defense is doing what it can do. There's overwhelming evidence against the defendant in my perspective, in my view. And I think the defense their strategy is to essentially poke holes, but I'm not sure that they're going to be able to do that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm excited to be here to have this conversation because, as you mentioned, unfortunately, we are in unprecedented times. And so it's now more than ever, and being in the Bronx, this is a great conversation to be having.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll start where you left off. We talked about these are unprecedented times. They're unprecedented times. I don't think anybody predicted a pandemic would ever hit us. And then the fact that we're in this a year plus, when many people thought this might be a 3-month thing, maybe a 4-month thing. But honestly, now we're to the place where we're talking about vaccinations. We're talking about awareness. And so give us a little bit of a landscape as to where you see things being right now.
And it's interesting you say, when thinking back, you said we thought it was 3 months. It's been a year. And unfortunately, a year ago at this time in 2020, in April of 2020, I think we were all literally scared to death. Either we were experiencing on the news, people losing their livelihood, people dying from the COVID virus, and not knowing exactly what that looked like, and agreeing like we maybe had 3 to 6 months, maybe at the least. And now looking a year later and not only being fortunate enough to see the vaccine, but understanding that this is not something that's over so quickly. And with there being with the decrease in vaccines being seen across the country, we need to now be able to understand what is it that we can do to make sure our community has the information they need, but also the access to the vaccine.
So talk to me a little bit about the National Black Leadership Commission on Health and the work that you're doing right now. I know the Bronx is front and center, but also all across New York City and the state.
Yeah. And so organizationally, we were the National Black Leadership Commission on AIDS. And so for 30 plus years, the cornerstone of the organization was based on HIV. And probably 7 years ago, really started seeing the correlation between HIV and other health disparities. And we rebranded in 2019 to change to the National Black Leadership on Health, to really be able to focus on the health disparities that have been front and center now around COVID. And we took our HIV model, which is about community mobilization, working with community leaders to educate around whatever the health disparity is. And unfortunately, COVID is the health emergency that we were catapulted into. And so we've spent now a year just in the community. And when I say in the community, we're on corners, we're on the street corners, we're at the bus stops, we're at, now we're able to go into spaces. But in the height of the pandemic, we literally were outside talking to community members, identifying public housing spaces where we saw the COVID rates be very high, where we saw multi-generational families live, where we saw people, as you mentioned, how we were being impacted not only in Black communities, but other communities of color. And why was that? First of all, the way we live, the way we work. We are, what we know now is if we stop working, the country ceases to exist. We are the people that are providing services, whether it's the hospital or the grocery store. And so people were being impacted in that way.
Said New York City is still in the wait. No official winner yet declared in the mayor's race. No official winner, more particularly in the Bronx Borough president's race. And critics are dealing with ranked choice voting. A lot of people say that ranked choice voting is the actual culprit as to why now we're not seeing anything happen by way of easy and fast time results. Joining us now to break this down a little bit more, we're pleased to have the former Bronx commissioner and president of the New York City Bronx Borough Board of Elections, I should say, my friend and brother, JC Polanco. And JC, good to have you back here on the show.
Thanks for having me, Daren. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. I'm trying to make sense out of all of this, and I'm sure you're going to help me to make sense of it.
I'll try.
When we first got started, we said, hey, a lot of people were like, oh, this ranked choice voting thing is not going to work. Here we are. We're still waiting on the results, and ranked choice voting comes in. Talk to us about where we are today, and are you surprised?
I'm not surprised. First of all, I'm not a fan of ranked choice voting, just for purposes of full disclosure. When this came to New York City voters, roughly 73% of New Yorkers voted and supported this initiative. This idea of ranked choice voting is very old. It's been around for over 150 years. This idea of ranked choice voting is seen in other cities like Oakland and San Francisco. But New York City is the largest board of elections in the country. Ranked choice voting seemed like a good idea to a lot of the people that voted for it as a reform. But it's a very, very ridiculous reform for New York. And the truth is this, Daren. When people see reform, they always think good. Reform is positive. Reform is better than the status quo. So even though, and this is where I always get upset at voters here in the Bronx and across the city, since we only have 20% that come out and vote in the totality, 73% of that 20% decided this was a good idea without really thinking it through. So what does this mean? We saw in Oakland that about 20% of all of the ballots that were casted in ranked choice voting were deemed as exhausted. And what that means is that the voters didn't get to select all 5 of their ranked choices. And perhaps the people that they did circle weren't even in the contention, so their ballots didn't even count at the end of the day. Ranked choice voting hurts Black and Latino candidates a great deal. And also, it allows for what I have called collusion, what those other folks have called allegiances or alliances to be formed in campaigning, which I think is absolutely ridiculous when you have 2 campaigns join forces like we saw here for the sole purpose that another candidate doesn't get the votes. And ranked choice voting was seen as a very good alternative because many thought it would have created an environment where you would have more people participating in the process. Well, that didn't pan out. This election turnout was just as awful as the other election turnout that we had. If reformers truly cared about expanding voter participation, they wouldn't ice out 1.5 million voters in New York, the 20% of New York voters that don't belong to any party, that had no say this June in the primary election, that elects 99% of all of our elected officials across the city. And when they said it was going to be more cost efficient, that was also false. Because of the fact that we have campaign finance and we had so many people getting 8-to-1 matching funds, we had a clown show in many of these council seats where folks had no shot, but they were getting more and more money in matching funds, so they had no reason to leave their campaigns. So for all those reasons, ranked choice voting is a complete and utter failure, and I hope we get rid of it.
I want to move to Shikari Richardson for a minute. We know now that she will not be making it to the Olympics, not because of the International Federation, but literally because of the U.S. team deciding not to allow her to compete in the upcoming Olympics, this following a positive test for marijuana. Now, the fact of the matter is she acknowledged the fact that she smoked marijuana. She received a 30-day suspension, but at the end of that 30-day suspension, she would become eligible to actually run in the relay. She couldn't run in the 100-meter, but she would be eligible to run in the relays. But the United States deciding not to send her to Tokyo. This is a statement that was made, quote, while USATF fully agrees that the merit of the World Anti-Doping Agency rules related to THC should be reevaluated, it would be detrimental to the integrity of the U.S. Olympic team trials for track and field if USATF amended its policies following competition only weeks before the Olympic Games. Now, this is according to a statement that was made by the time that we went on air shortly after the suspension. I want to get your take on this here because I agree, rules are rules, and if you broke the rules, you ought to pay the price. But if somebody has already upheld their suspension and they've done their suspension, why not allow her to at least compete in the relays?
This is so stupid for so many reasons. But the first one is weed leaves your system, whether a few hours or a day or so. It definitely in a month. I'm no doctor, but I know definitely know. Second of all, it's not a performance-enhancing drug. Third of all, it would have been before the suspension. So and what is integrity? To me, integrity is a person that makes a mistake, owns up to the mistakes, and just rights her wrong. That is an example of integrity. Integrity is not something that for no reason, because again, I do agree with she broke the rules, fine, accept the suspension, and keep it moving. I don't understand. No, I do understand it's racist, it's not cool, and it's not an example of integrity. For the second, for banning her for the 4x1 relay is absolutely absurd. But also from a money standpoint, from a fan standpoint, like I'm just not understanding how that conversation in that room went. So listen, our biggest let's think about if Jordan did this, right? We've heard of the Jordan rules, right? Like let's figure something out to make Jordan compete. Let's figure something out, to have to work it out, to massage this so that it makes sense. And I just feel like they're doing this young lady a disservice. They're doing America a disservice. For what reason? Right.
And that's what I'm saying. You said it right there. Let's talk Michael Jordan or basketball, right? Let's talk baseball. Let's talk any sport whatsoever. Right. If a player is suspended for X amount of time, after that suspension, right, that player becomes eligible to play. Right. Basketball, football, hockey, right, any sport after a suspension, right, you become eligible. Right. But here's the case. She would become eligible, right, but the United States says, we're still not bringing you over to Tokyo. That's the biggest hypocrisy for me. Right. I understand rules. I understand you got to suspend somebody. I understand you have to do what you have to do. Right. Rules are rules. Okay, great. Now that the rules have been done with, now that the law has been applied, and now that you're in that period, how do you not? And for a woman of her situation, let's talk. I mean, she talked about smoking marijuana, and I'm not using it as an excuse, but let's look at the situation. Her mother died. She was in the middle of grief. She was going through something. And here it is, this insensitivity, if you will, towards that, because the suspension is over. Yeah,
it's just, again, it's so wrong on so many levels. First of all, I just feel like they don't want to win is the first point. And I'm not understanding this. But under those circumstances, in a legal state, which she did it, where the charge is being held, she broke no actual laws. And I don't, when they say integrity, the American way is you do a crime or you have an infraction, you pay your dues and you keep it moving. That's integrity of our system.
And congratulations to you. I know that you're on the Education and Labor Committee as well as Science and Technology. So they've given you that. So you got some work ahead of you there. When you talk about education, obviously that's at the backbone of what you do. You were an educator. Talk to us about it again right now. We're talking about kids going back to school and still a lot of angst. You got the Delta variant out there, kids getting ready to go back. You got teachers, you got parents who are on the front lines, very, very concerned. What do you want to share with us with regards to the return back to school?
In order to keep kids and teachers safe, we have to be creative in our approach to reopening our schools. I understand the need to bring all of the kids back at the same time, but we have to also deal with the reality that there are many parts of our community where we have high COVID infection rates and low vaccination rates. And in those circumstances, you're going to have kids under 12 who aren't vaccinated going into class sizes as high as 30 kids, maybe even more. And that's just a recipe for additional outbreaks of the Delta variant, which targets kids a bit more. So I understand the need to open fully because kids need to be in front of a teacher, but there have been parents that have requested a remote option. I support that. I think we should support that as educators. In addition to homeschool options and homeschool networks, we have to be creative. We have to give kids formal education opportunities outside of the classroom. You have the classroom, but parks are learning spaces, museums are learning spaces, libraries are learning spaces. Someone's home is a learning space, and we need to make sure our policies and our resources are aligned to the unprecedented challenges that COVID it continues to present, especially with concerns to the Delta variant. So that's where we are. That's what I support, and that's why and how I've been working with school districts and school education leaders across the state to implement programs like this.
Well, as you got a chance to see, a whole lot happened throughout the course of 2021, and glad that we can bring you some of it right here on Perspectives. Want to let you know now, if you want to find out more, of course, tune in as BronxNet will be having Perspectives in 2022. We'll have some brand new episodes, some good guests that you will be able to get some fresh content with that will be able to stimulate your mind and hopefully give you a different kind of perspective. Again, I got to thank Curlew Burton, my producer, my line producer, Lindsay. It's her last show with us. Thank you both for the work that you've done here on Perspectives. Listen, everybody, God willing, we'll see you in 2022. I'm Daren Jaime saying take care, God bless, and share your perspective with somebody else. It just might make a difference in someone else's life.
Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, just speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he likes